easily upsettable, so just make sure it's ethical. My attention span's minimal, so just rehash a sequel and make sure it's forgettable and instantly replaceable.
Hey everybody, hope you're enjoying Too Dark Helloween, our second year. Right now we've got a special guest that you've heard his name before. You definitely recognize his music and his guitar riffs from the past, and you've even heard his stuff recently today. We have Jim Davies, former Pitch Shifter and Prodigy member. How's it going, man?
Good. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. We did the announcement for Armalite a month and a half ago. That was great to hear you land on that label. It's a great artist-friendly label that you landed on right there.
Yeah, I mean, I've known of them for quite a long time. I've got friends and bands that have worked with them and have said nothing but good things about them. And I just think that it's a really good home for my kind of music. Really. I think they've got a really good community of people that are going to be hopefully into it and quite open-minded. And I think it's a good sort of home for it, hopefully.
Yeah, they do a really good job listening to the artists. They really make it about the artists. They're not trying to put all these traditional kind of label paradigms and rules around you. So that's a good place for you.
That would never have happened because I hadn't really intended this to go out on a label anyway, because the last album I did, Head Wars, last year, was pretty much released independently, really. It just went out through my publisher. My publisher's got an artist sort of side to the label. So it went out that way and didn't have like a massive push, really. But through hooking up with, the Armalite guys, I could tell that they weren't going to be someone that wanted different mixes and were going to get really involved in the actual music side of it. It was more like I spoke to Giles and Jules and said, look, I've got this album coming out. I've been asked a million times about Bandcamp. I haven't got a Bandcamp. I've got no intention of setting one up, but I know that's your thing and that's how you do your thing. Would you be interested in putting the album out through your channels and your community? And he was like, yeah. So I sent it to him and luckily he liked it, and that was it. There was no, and that's the way it would have, if they'd come back and asked for lots of different changes, I just would have said, look, no guys, it's not really going to work, because I wasn't looking for a label. They just sort of fell into my lap, really. So, and you can tell that they're just all about the music. They're just really passionate people. So that's what you want. I just only want to work with people that are nice and are into the music, and it's not like a financial thing for me. It's just I want the music to
get some more ears on it, right?
Yeah. And I think
most people look at Jim Davies on the internet and they hear about guitar playing. So do you look at yourself kind of as a guitar player, a guitar guy, or more of a producer these days?
No, I don't see myself as a guitarist at all. He says, surrounded by guitars. But, I've got the guitars in the studio. I'm looking at them. There's loads over there. There's loads over there. They're all covered in dust. I've got a couple of guitars here that are my go-to guitars that I use, but the rest of them are just covered in dust. I mean, and that's not... I do enjoy playing the guitar, but I think I spent... In the bands I was in the past, that's all I was. I was the guitarist, and I never got into the production side of things. I never had a clue how to produce. And I've worked with some really good, huge producers in my time. And looking back at it, I sort of kicked myself a little bit. I should have really been sat on their shoulder looking at what they were doing. But, I was 22, 23, 24. I couldn't care less what compression he was using. All I wanted to do was, when are we doing guitars? When are we going out? That was it. Where's the PlayStation? So
your first gig was in Paris with Prodigy, right?
Yeah, and that was when I was like 21 years old, straight out of college, didn't know my arse from my elbow, just thrown into this huge thing that I loved, that I was obsessed with. But so back then I was obsessed with playing guitar, and I just was that sort of archetypal thing of like teenager in his bedroom shredding for 8 hours a day. But I think it's not that I grew out of it. It's more that I got into, when I stopped playing live, I started thinking about, how do I continue having a career in music without having to tour all the time? Because people forget that I started touring when I was 21, and it was solid for 10 years, and maybe longer than that actually. So that's when I started getting into writing music for TV and for film promos and cinematic style stuff. And I quickly learned that I'm going to have to produce this myself. I can't just get someone else to do it. It doesn't work like that. You have to give these companies a finished product. So it was a steep learning curve, and I probably should have learned a lot more from watching these other producers that I've worked with over the years. But I think a lot of it probably subliminally sunk in there because I didn't find it too hard to pick up. And so over the last 10 years, I've written sort of thousands of pieces of music and got my head round producing and mixing. So it was only like about 3 or 4 years ago that I was sort of sat here in the studio just thinking it might be fun to sort of do an album of my own stuff again as an artist, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, and I felt like I had the skills to do it myself without having to find another producer and pimp it out to a mixer, which is how you used to do it in the old days. You know, you used to go to a studio, you used to find a producer and mixer. So it was only about 3 years ago that I felt like I had the skills now to do it all myself. So these days, you know, I'm sat here in front of my computer actually as we're talking, and if I'm writing a track and I think it needs guitar, I almost resent having to sort of lean back here and go, oh, I've got to tune it up. Oh, it's going to be out of tune, and the strings haven't been changed for 5 years. But I do enjoy it. I enjoy it when I don't do it all the time. There's certain tracks that I feel need guitar, but I'm quite happiest if I'm not putting guitar in there. If I feel it needs it, it goes in. But I don't try and shoehorn it in there so it's electronic rock. You know, it's pointless. But that said, you know, this new album, there's a lot of guitar on there. When I look at some of the projects in Logic, when I'm sort of doing, you know, the mixes, there's like 140, 50 tracks sometimes. It's a stupid amount of tracks. And a lot of that is layers and textures of guitar parts that might not sound like guitar on first listen, but that's sort of what I've always been into. So yeah, this new album's definitely not a shred guitar album, that's for sure.
I think probably one of the things we want to cover is the fact that it's really. I thought about it this morning. I was like, you know, it's it could almost be labeled the many layers of Jim Davies, because it's got so many elements from the different things you've done over the years. It's really, really cool, and I think that it also answers one of the questions that a lot of people ask for now about how it seems like almost everybody writes songs and not really albums. Where your project, you can really tell it was written as an album.
Yeah, I really miss that. I mean, that's one of the things I used to really love about when I was doing all the band stuff, was actually that whole process of doing an album from scratch. I was just saying to Eric before you got on, I sort of get to this sort of time of year when it's autumn, and in England it starts getting dark really early, and it sort of feels like a really nice time to settle in and write an album. And these days it doesn't take me too long once I get really into it. I think both the last 2 solo albums that I did probably only took sort of 3 months probably to write, maybe a month to sort of knock into shape. So, but yeah, a few people have said to me, "I'll just do an EP, or why don't you just do 4 singles and just like keep writing?" To me, it just doesn't sit right. I know it's the way it is at the moment with a lot of modern artists, but I don't know, I love the idea of writing an album and working out the track listing and stuff like that. And, you know, having a physical product as well this time around, which we'll probably get to in this chat later. Yeah. So yeah, I love the fact that it's 12 tracks, and the last album was 12 tracks, and it's very easy to sort of scrape together sort of 8 tracks and call it an album, isn't it? Where I'm a bit old school. I like the idea of doing a full album.
I would think, and 95 must have definitely been an interesting period for going in for that project, because it was a really turn and a curve, because I was one of the DJs in 1991 that was playing Charlie when it first came out. So, and I remember playing like the Jungle Influence. I think it was Outer Space that I used to play a lot, and that was all electronic, really within the rave realm then. Yeah. So, you know, it's interesting how the band really evolved over the years and continued to progress the sound.
Yeah, I mean that when I first started playing with them, that was that moment when it really started to cross over. I mean, obviously, Jilted Generation had been out for a while by then, but they was touring in support of that album still. So, but for me, it was insane, really, because like I said, I was fresh out of university. I was still at university, so I was going to like clubs, and every club was having this big section. The DJs would play a big section of electronic and rock melding together, and they'd always play Their Law. They'd always play. Do you remember that soundtrack called Judgment Night?
Yeah.
Where you had Faith No More and Onyx and Helmet and Booyah Tribe
soundtracks back then.
Yeah, that they always played that, and so yeah, that was that moment when everything crossed over, where sort of rock kids started listening to electronic music and not seeing it as this is just rave shit that just throw away stuff that we hate that's in the charts. You actually heard it for the first time, and first time I heard tracks like Break and Enter and Their Law, and especially when I saw it live for the first time, it was like this is the heaviest thing I've heard. Even though at the time I was pretty much just fascinated and stuck into guitar music and listening to bands like Pantera that I thought were heavy, and then the first time I saw Prodigy live, I was like, nah, that's heavy. That was a massive turning point. So, and that was all around the same time, sort of 1995. So, that year I'd probably gone from listening to the band religiously to Jilted Generation non-stop, listening to it in clubs, going mental in clubs to it, and then later that year ending up sort of on tour. So it was a very, very weird time.
Didn't you record like guitar over that album, the Jilted Generation, and put it on tape and hand it to him or something?
Yeah, well, it was just because I was so young and just thought, well, when you're that young, you don't even think about how cheeky it is what you're doing. But yeah. I was working at the university where they played. They played at my university that I was at, and I'd blagged my way in to sort of, I say, set up the gig. I didn't do anything. I just helped push a few things, and you got in for nothing if you carried a few bits of equipment. So just got talking to their roadie and said, they saw them sound check, but they didn't have a guitarist. So I sort of said, why haven't they got a guitarist? And the roadie said, well, they tried it, didn't really work. And then I just went, right, I'm going to give this a go. And I just sort of ran home and put a tape recorder next to a tape recorder. They were that bad, and just put on the tape of Jilted Generation, press record on the other one, and then jammed over the whole album. And then went back that night and went back and said hello, because obviously there was an Essex connection that we were all from the same place, and just managed to blag my way backstage because I was working there, and gave Liam the demo tape and didn't think anything of it. But yeah, a week later I got a call and he said, what are you doing next week? I was like, well, I'm at university, aren't I? He said, oh, do you want to go to Paris? Do you want to do a gig in Paris? I was like, yeah. And then that was it from then onwards. So it was a very surreal, weird time. And looking back on it, it's sort of quite a double-edged sword, because there's quite mixed feelings about it all. But, it was very completely thrown in at the deep end. I was nowhere near ready for that sort of size stuff. But maybe that was a good thing, because I just didn't really think about it too much and just went, all right, okay, this must be how it works. You get your favorite, you go to see your favorite band, and you suddenly give them a demo tape and you start touring with them next week. That's how it works. Brilliant.
Rock and roll, man.
Yeah, it's that easy. Why didn't I think of this before? But so yeah, weird time. It's mad to think how long ago that was. It doesn't. I suppose it does sort of feel like that long ago now.
Upsettable, so just make sure it's ethical. My attention span is minimal, so just rehash a sequel and make sure it's forgettable and instantly replaceable.
You and Scott Duran are doing a set tomorrow for Dark Indulgence.
Yeah,
that's going to be out. So what do you guys have planned?
Yeah, it's a mixture of stuff that I'm listening to at the moment, and stuff that I'm influenced by, or tracks that, I spend a lot of time. I don't like going out, especially at the moment. It's a bit scary. People are weird. So I spend a lot of time in my kitchen me and the wife sit downstairs.
Safer.
Yeah, I'm just put on tracks and just blast it out. So, when I said about when you guys asked me to put together this set, I thought I pretty much know what it's going to be, because it's probably exactly what we put on every Friday night, sort of downstairs. So it's a mixture of tracks that I love. There's tracks on there like there's a track called Satisfy by Nero. That's one of my favourite tracks. I think the production on that is just huge. It's, to me, it's one of the very first sort of cyberpunky sort of tracks that before that thing got huge. There's some sort of more modern's a shit word to use, isn't it? But up-to-date artists. Like there's a guy called Grandson that I like. There's a track called Stigmata that I think is really cool. There's not many artists out there, new artists, that are doing beats and guitars well, and I think he is, and that's really good. Then there's the obvious stuff that I just listen to all the time, like bands like there's a bit of Depeche Mode in there that are in my part of my musical DNA. It's just impossible for me to not have a bit of influence. I think if you're into electronic music and you don't like Depeche Mode, then you need to have a little word with yourself, really.
I think you need a David Gahan guest vocal collaboration on the.
Yeah. I don't know if I could handle that. I'd probably lose it. And Nine Inch Nails, obviously, massive fan of Trent Reznor and the way he's evolved from Nine Inch Nails right through to what he's doing now in his film scores and stuff. What else is on the playlist? I'm trying to think. Oh, there's a couple of Imperium tracks.
Everybody on this channel is a big fan of Imperium, so
that's good. Yeah, they should be getting more of a bit more recognition, those guys. I might chuck in a few new tracks from my album, if that's all right, if that's not too cheeky. There's a remix I might put on. Yeah, I did. I put the remix I did for Pig recently, because I was quite chuffed how that came out, and I don't really do remixes. I've hardly done any over the years, which, as a solo artist, if you want, whatever you want to call it, I've only ever done a couple. And that was one of the reasons I ended up working with the Armalite guys. So that was a cool little thing to do. Giles from the label asked me if I'd remix that track or pick a track, and I did that track, and it came out really well. And that's how we started talking about, well, what else have you got going on? So I said, well, I've got this album coming out, and that's how we got talking. So it's quite cool how one thing leads to the other, isn't it? It's good.
Make sure you guys tune in to Dark Indulgence tomorrow. Jim will be on there. And the new album, Pray Later, comes out on Armalite Industries, November 19th. We're going to sprinkle some of the new songs through some of the DJ sets today. Thanks, Jim, for providing some of those for us. And we're going to go to a Jim Davies video right now. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.